Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Newton and Pushover. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hi, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I'm pretty excited about this episode because we're going to go off the beaten path just a little bit, and we're going to talk about the Apple TV and Apple TV apps, which we probably don't have too many Apple TV app shows in us, but it's a platform that I think it's been a little bit of a disappointment, even though it's a smaller universe of apps that are available than something like iOS. Because obviously, on a television, you're not going to want to do much more than watch video, maybe play a game or two. But even with that smaller universe, I think that it hasn't really done particularly well. But still, there's some hidden gems there, and I thought we would have a little fun with it and see what are some of the apps that you and I use.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that we've been working on this episode trying to find apps for the past 12 years. And now we have found 6 Apple TV apps that we can talk about.
Well, you joke about it, but what we're going to do is we're going to each pick 3 Apple TV apps. And my one condition was that one of them can't be a game or a video app.
So that was already difficult. So you also set some ground rules.
I did, but I didn't think it would be that difficult. But it kind of was hard, don't you think?
I struggled, and one of my picks it's probably not properly an Apple TV app. I mean, we'll talk about it, but it's not on the App Store, so I don't know if it qualifies. But I struggled.
Well, before we get to one of those sad round robins that we like to do, I thought it would be useful to give a little context and tell people a little bit about how we use our Apple TVs. I'll let you go first.
I'm pretty obvious in this regard. I wasn't a big fan of the Apple TV platform until I got a 4K TV. We had a really sad and small television in our bedroom, which is where we watch most of the content that we consume. Usually after dinner or very early in the morning if we're slacking and it's like a Sunday and we don't want to get up. But we had this small TV and, we didn't really like watching movies on that. But then last year for Black Friday, I got a 55-inch 4K TV and I also got an Apple TV 4K to go with that. And since then, we have rediscovered the pleasure of watching movies and TV shows on a big monitor, on a big display, which is also OLED and HDR and all the fancy new technologies are in there. And so what we do is, I would say 70% of the time, we watch TV episodes. We follow a bunch of series that I keep track of in Couchy, which is the excellent iOS app to keep track of TV shows. So we watch TV episodes. And lately, just out of convenience, and because I don't have a Mac server anymore with Plex going on, I've just been buying stuff on iTunes again because I couldn't be bothered to try other ways. And to do so, to watch these episodes, I use the Apple TV, the TV app on the Apple TV, which is not confusing at all.
Right.
And I know that most people hate the TV app, but I think it's not the best or the most revolutionary TV watching experience ever, but it gets the job done for me. And I like how it aggregates content from a bunch of different sources.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good place to start. I mean, you may have to go somewhere else, but if you look there first, you can usually see what you're in the middle of and maybe a couple of suggestions that are worthwhile.
Yeah, so we watch TV shows in there. And when we're not using the Apple TV app, we may use Infuse, which also got a big update this week. Lately, I've been testing, thanks to the folks at the Make Channels, which is an app that lets you watch over-the-air television. It connects to an HD home run tuner, and it allows you to watch TV on your Apple TV. And the folks at Channels have been kind enough to let me test the app. So I've been trying that to watch live television without leaving the Apple TV UI and the HDMI input on my TV. Or we use, Netflix, of course, and HBO Go, which I need to use via streaming on my iPad because I want to watch a bunch of TV shows on HBO Go in the United States. I have a US App Store account. We've talked about this before. And I can sort of fake being a US user with my iTunes credit, but still HBO Go wants a VPN connection. It wants a US IP address, which means I need to use a VPN.
Right.
So I use encrypt.me on my iPad. It used to be called Cloak. The problem is that I don't think the native VPN apps exist on the Apple TV. So what I need to do is I need to start the TV show on my iPad and stream it to the Apple TV. Which is not ideal, but it kind of works. So TV, and then I would say movies. Again, I buy them from iTunes for a specific reason, 4K HDR. It's what I can get, the best quality movies that I can find. And the very occasional game, but really very, very occasional game, and some YouTube, although I prefer to use, and this is quite ironic because it's really, you wouldn't expect me to say this, but I prefer the app that comes pre-installed. With my LG TV, it runs WebOS.
Really?
Yeah, it feels more like the real YouTube.
Okay.
And I have a feeling that the videos have a better quality on that app. It's either that or I stream videos from YouTube using a Chromecast. What's it called? The Ultra?
Yep.
The 4K version. Because the YouTube app for the Apple TV does not support 60 frames per second or 4K. And the UI is kind of janky. I don't really like it.
It's terrible. No, I totally understand why you don't use the Apple TV app. I was just surprised that you use the LG app.
It's pretty good, actually.
That's good to know. I don't have an LG TV, but the Apple TV YouTube app is so bad that I much prefer watching YouTube on my iPad.
I understand. Yeah, makes sense. What do you use your Apple TV for?
So it sounds like our use of the Apple TV is very similar. I'd say at least 3/4 of it is watching television shows. So that usually involves Netflix and Hulu. I cut the cord last summer, so I don't have a cable subscription. So I use Netflix. I use Hulu with Hulu Live, which gives me a lot of the major networks and other cable channels live through Hulu, as well as HBO Now, which is the iOS only version. It's very confusing. I never remember which is HBO Go and which is HBO Now. HBO Now is the one where you just sign up on Apple TV. And that one I just recently signed up for.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's the one I cannot use because it requires like a credit card and like an address and all that. HBO Go, I think it's the on-demand one that you can just sign up for with the iTunes credentials. Yeah.
Right. So those are kind of the major ones. I also use YouTube, and we'll get into one of my picks, but I use YouTube once in a while because it's nice to watch on the big screen. But beyond that, it's movies. A lot of weekends we'll rent a movie on the iTunes movie app that's built into the Apple TV. But beyond that, not much. It's TV and movies. Thanks to Newton for sponsoring App Stories this week. Let's talk a little bit about email. Few people have kind words for email, but the fact of the matter is, it's not going anywhere. It's the backbone of so much of our communication, whether it's for work, keeping in touch with family and friends, or coordinating your personal life. As a result, you owe it to yourself to use a rock-solid, reliable email client like Newton. It's an email client that'll help you manage the deluge of messages you send and receive every single day. Of course, Newton syncs across all of your devices, so it's always available whether you're on iOS or your Mac. And it supports all sorts of email systems and protocols, too. One of the best parts of Newton is its focus on your messages. The UI is clean and uncluttered, making it easy to get to your messages, deal with them, and get out. Newton is also thoroughly modern. It supports read receipts, send later, and it integrates with the iOS calendar and has snoozing. And of course, there are integrations with third-party apps and services like Evernote and Trello too, which will help you get the information out of your messages and somewhere where you can deal with them. Newton even compiles a sender profile from publicly available information on the web so you know more about who's sending you messages. I've also got one more thing for you. Next week, Newton is launching a major new feature. I can't say more about it now, but keep your eyes on Mac Stories for more information in the coming week. To learn more about Newton, please use the link in our show notes so Newton knows you heard about it from App Stories. We're also doing a giveaway for 10 one-year Newton subscriptions. That's a $50 value available only to App Stories listeners. Check out the show notes for a link to the giveaway. Thanks again to Newton for supporting the show. So why don't we get into the picks? And what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth in that kind of sad round robin style. And I'll start with a video pick, which is Plex, because as I mentioned before, I canceled my cable last summer and since then have been using streaming services, and those are great, but there are some things once in a while. I'm not a big sports fan, so I don't feel like I miss that. But I lose things like local news. There are big events like sometimes it's better to watch things like the Grammys and the Oscars on Plex over Plex Live, which is what I pay for a Plex Pass. It's like $5 a month. And what I do is I have a digital antenna that pulls in the over-the-air signal from Chicago and goes through the HD home run that you mentioned earlier and converts that to I think it's an MP4 file, and allows me to stream local television onto my Apple TV through Plex, which is really nice, and also record it, which is pretty cool. So I do that. I've found that I use that a lot less than I expected because Hulu has really good coverage of most of the shows that I like to watch. But once in a while, there's something on television that I want to just record and watch later, or I want to watch live. And the Plex app does a really good job. It has an amazing amount of functionality packed into an Apple TV app. Do you ever use the Plex app, Federico?
I used to use Plex every day back when I had a Synology server, and then it died. It exploded, basically. And I'm still waiting for Apple to make a new Mac Mini because everybody told me to wait. Everybody told me, don't buy the Mac Mini now. Steven told me, don't buy the Mac Mini.
We both told you that, yeah.
I listen to my friends when they tell me to do things. And so I didn't buy a Mac Mini. I'm still waiting. I hope that WWDC will bring a Mac Mini. And if so, I will buy the most powerful one that I can find because it will be updated like the next decade. So I need to future-proof.
That'll be the one more thing will be the Mac Mini, Federico.
And I will run Plex again if that's the case. In the meantime, what I do is I watch your live television over Plex.
Yes, you do. You enjoy those American commercials,
Would you
don't
care to tell our listeners what you did for me?
So, yes. When did we set this up? It was around the time of the
for
Grammys? The Grammys, maybe?
Yeah.
So I have this digital antenna that's, at the moment, it's taped up in in my son's bedroom in his window because he's off to college. He doesn't care. And so it's in there, and it has a coaxial cable coming off of it. Goes into the HD home run, which then goes into the wired network that funnels into a Mac Mini, but it's, I don't even know, maybe a 2015? It's recent in Mac Mini terms, but down in my basement. And that just serves as the Plex server. And you have the ability to log into that and watch live TV in Chicago from Rome, Italy.
So yeah, that's what I do. I watch American events thanks to John. So thank you, John. That's really kind of you. My first pick, it's not a video app. It's not a game. I mean, it's got a video feed, but it's not it doesn't let me watch TV shows. It's a home cam, and it's the Apple TV version of an iOS utility that connects to HomeKit cameras and allows you to watch video feeds from your HomeKit cameras without having to use the Apple Home app. And I like this because by default, both on iOS and on tvOS, of course, where it's most effective because of the big display, HomeCam brings up this dashboard. So the main view is a grid view with these live updating video tiles from your multiple HomeKit cameras, if you have multiple ones around the house. And you can, from here, you can just swipe on the Siri remote to open the full screen view for a single camera. And what I like is that in addition to letting you watch the video feed, so like when I'm doing a podcast, for example, and Sylvia's not at home and I want to keep an eye on the dogs, I can load up HomeCam on my Apple TV, open the living room camera, and keep an eye on what the dogs are doing while I'm doing a podcast. Also, what I like is that in a recent update from a few weeks ago, the developer, his name is Aaron Pierce, he added support for sensor data. So this is really clever. If the HomeKit camera is located in the same room by HomeKit definition where you have other sensors, you will be able to see that data alongside the video feed. So for example, in my HomeCam, I can see the video from my living room camera, but also the weather, the temperature from my Elgato sensor, which is also in the living room. And I can see the humidity, and I can also see my lights because they are located in the same room. So from that view, while I'm watching the video feed, I can take action on those accessories. Like I can change my lights, or I can turn on the air purifier. I can do things while I'm watching and confirm visually that what I'm doing has actually worked. It's really clever, and it works really well on the Apple TV because it's got a big display and it's convenient.
What you're telling me is you can lie in bed all day long and just make things happen in your apartment, right?
I'm not saying that, but if you wanna draw that conclusion, that is accurate. Yes.
Thanks to Pushover for sponsoring App Stories this week. Pushover is a cross-platform notification app and service. What do I mean by that? It's no secret that we like to automate things here at Mac Stories to make our jobs easier and to keep on top of things. One of the critical components of that is Pushover. It eliminates the need to keep checking a bunch of different sites and services. Instead, the information comes to us, which I absolutely love. It has dozens of integrations and works with iOS devices, Android, macOS, browsers, and with Internet of Things devices with a simple API call to deliver notifications. Pushover works with automation systems like IFTTT, Zapier, home automation tools like Home Assistant and Indigo, and even web plugins for WordPress and online shops like WooCommerce. What you can accomplish with Pushover is only limited by your imagination. Here at Mac Stories, for instance, we use Pushover with Zapier to get notifications when the Apple Store goes down, or when Apple posts a video to YouTube or issues a press release to the newsroom site. It recently added image support too, so you can do things like send security camera images as notifications. With Pushover, you get unlimited notifications on a per-platform basis for just $4.99. There's a 7-day free trial too, so you can try before you buy. It's a great deal, and there's no subscription, no recurring costs, just $5, and you're all set. To learn more and start your 7-day free trial, visit pushover.net/appstories. I'll put a link in the show notes, and please use it so Pushover knows that you came from App Stories. Thanks again to Pushover for supporting the show. So I am going to pick a game. I'm going to pick Alto's Odyssey because this is one of my favorite games of 2018 so far. And I struggled with this pick a little bit because games on the Apple TV just aren't great. I think it's the way the mechanical button works because it's a little bit like the old trackpads that Apple had, which were actually mechanical. And, it was kind of like a lever mechanism. There's a lot of travel that has to happen before you actually do a click. So that's fine if you're switching channels, but it's not great in a game that requires kind of precision timing. So my recommendation is qualified. I think you need to have an M5 controller. And I use the Steelcase Nimbus. And I'll tell you, this is a recommendation, but still I don't play games on the Apple TV very much because I had a hard time finding my controller yesterday when I wanted to go back and play around with the game a little bit. Games on the Apple TV are, to me, it's one of the biggest opportunities that Apple's missed because they've created AirPods, right? They've created technology on top of a Bluetooth stack that's proprietary and is more responsive, has less lag, and does all kinds of things that Bluetooth can't do on its own. Yet they've still got this remote, which is laggy when it comes to games. It's just not a good experience. But with the Nimbus controller, there's enough, the mechanics of the controller, there's still lag, but they're better enough that it makes the game playable. And that game is gorgeous. It's beautiful when it's on a big screen. The sound is great. You have it, connected to some good speakers. It just looks fantastic on a big screen. And that's why I recommend it, because once in a while, I just like to kind of listen to the soundtrack and play through a few levels on my TV, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game, and it really is amazing on the Apple TV. I think the colors and the soundscapes, they really do work well on the Apple TV. It's the only game I think that I have on my Apple TV. So my next app is a video app in the traditional sense. It's Infuse, which I mentioned earlier. Infuse is a video player that can play anything. Essentially, this is what the app does. You can point any number of locations. By locations, I mean your home server, your computer, your cloud account like Dropbox or Google Drive, or an IP address or a direct link to a video. It doesn't matter. Infuse can take it. It supports multiple media formats, basically any kind of media formats, from MP4, MKV, AVI, anything that you can think of, it's likely supported by Infuse. And it supports 4K, HDR, H.264, H.265, all the greatest video acronyms are supported by Infuse, basically. And it looks fantastic. The app just got an update on the Apple TV, I think a few days ago. This is why I wanted to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
It's now much easier to use. It's colorful. It's got this, it kind of looks like the home screen of the Apple TV itself. So you get these rows of sections that you can customize. Of course, you can say these are my favorites. So for example, you can do things like my downloads folder on my MacBook Pro is one of my favorites. And then you can say, but I also have a Synology server and I want to make sure that the Modern Family Season 9 folder is also among my favorites. So you can mix and match all these favorites however you want. And then when you go into an episode and you select it, you will get all the fancy, rich, artwork and metadata. So like titles, subtitles, show art, posters, descriptions, cast, duration, all of that. And all of these pieces of metadata are loaded by stuff like the movie database, the TV database, all these connections that Infuse takes care of behind the scenes without you having to configure anything. It just happens automatically. There's support for Tracked.tv, which is a service to sync your TV watching collection and experience between multiple devices, which I also use. Mm-hmm. And there's native integration with Open Subtitles, which is a community of free and open source subtitles that are automatically made available to TV episodes that you watch in Infuse. I wanted to point out a new feature of Infuse, which is perfect for the Apple TV, and that is native Plex integration. So now you can treat your Plex account as any other service or any other location that you add in Infuse.
Oh.
And you can just use Infuse as an interface for Plex.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, if you don't like the Plex UI, or if you need one of the fancy codecs that Infuse supports, whether it's like a DTS or H.265, Infuse really supports all the most modern technologies when it comes to HD audio or 4K video. You can use Infuse to view your Plex account, essentially. Yeah, and the setup, I did the setup this morning, and it was really, it was flawless. Essentially, when you say, I want to connect my Infuse to my Plex account, the Apple TV, you get this huge QR code, and with iOS 11, you can just open the camera, point the iPhone to your television, and it finds the QR code. It takes you to a Plex online page where you input the 4-digit code that you also see on the TV, and you're done. It's like a 20-second process. And now my Infuse is connected to my Plex account. And, this, I think I'm going to take advantage of this once I get a new Mac server, because I could use my MacBook as my Mac server, but, I got to keep my MacBook open and somewhere, and it occupies a lot of space. So I'm waiting for a Mac Mini. But once I have a Mac Mini again, and once I got my Plex server set up again, I'm going to use this a lot.
Well, I think I know what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to set that up because that sounds really interesting. I think the Plex interface is okay. It's fine. It's not the best, but Infuse is really one of the best interfaces I've seen on the Apple TV for video. So Federico, the last app that I want to mention is Streaks Workouts. And this is my non-video, non-game pick. There are a lot of different fitness apps available on the Apple TV, but I kind of like Streaks Workouts the best because it's so simple. I mean, it has 30 workouts built into it. You can create your own custom workouts if you'd like. And then you pick your favorites amongst the 30 or so that are there. And then you decide how long of a workout you want to do. Do you want to do, I think it has 4, 6, 12, 18, and 30-minute workouts. And you hit go, and it shows you a very, very Streaks-like icon. If you've used the Streaks app, which I know you and I have both used, the icons are very similar, but they're animated on the Apple TV. And it gives you a little demonstration of how to do each thing, whether it's, push-ups or crunches or whatever you're doing. They're all exercises that you can do without any kind of equipment. So if it's, some morning and you feel like exercising, you've got a little space in your living room, you can start this up on your Apple TV, go through it, and you pick the amount of time you want to spend exercising, and it starts. And once you do each of the exercises that are in that routine, you tap on the remote and it advances to the next one, and you just do it until the time limit is up. It's really nicely done, and I think the design is good. The icons are really big. It's easy to follow, and it's just about as simple as you could possibly get for doing a quick workout of exercises that don't require you to, find some weights or any other kind of equipment that you might need. So that would be my pick.
All right, so my last pick is it's the one that is problematic, as I mentioned, because this is not available on the App Store. So
No, it's not.
I'm not sure it qualifies for this round robin. It sort of half qualifies, maybe. I don't know. It's called Provenance, and it's an emulator for old video games, such as the old Nintendo consoles, the Sega consoles, the Atari ones, I believe. If you have a memory of an old video game consoles, you likely can emulate it through Provenance on tvOS and iOS. There's also support for the PlayStation 1. So in theory, you should be able to play Final Fantasy, Tactics, or 7 or 8 on Provenance. There's going to be in the show notes a link to Provenance from the documentation, which is available on GitHub. And this is the problem. Because Provenance is not available on the App Store, you need to manually download the Xcode project,
Yes.
open it up, change a bunch of settings for your developer account, and manually install it on your Apple TV or iPad, whatever it is. Now, it sounds scary. It kind of is, but really, if you follow the instructions, it takes you 5 minutes. I was also scared, and I put this off for a long time because I was like, no, I'm not a developer. I don't want to open Xcode. Really, there's visual menus for everything. You're not writing any code here. You're just confirming stuff manually from Xcode. It's really, really easy, and there's steps that you can follow. Once you get your app installed, of course, you have to get games in there. I'm not going to say how. I suppose that everybody's just making digital versions of their old PlayStation games and Super Nintendo cartridges. So if you do that, you can build your library in Provenance, and it's an excellent emulator. It's got support for, of course, external controllers, local multiplayer. If you have multiple controllers around the house, it supports battery saves, which means the native save points in a game, or virtual save states. So this is a thing that emulators do sometimes. They allow you to save a game at any point. Doesn't matter what you're doing. For example, let's say you're fighting a boss in Metroid on the Super Nintendo. Usually there wouldn't be a checkpoint during the boss fight.
Right.
But if you're using an emulator, you can save and then turn off the emulator and pick it up again later. So there's a support for native and virtual save states. No iCloud support because I think this is not a commercial application, so it cannot work with iCloud. But it works on the iPhone, it works on the iPad, and it works on the Apple TV, where it's best experience because it's got the big screen and everything. There's support for a bunch of tvOS exclusive features, such as the top shelf integration. And I think if you miss playing old video games, I highly recommend taking 30 minutes of your time to get this installed. And also make sure to check out, there's also going to be a link in the show notes. The developers are working on Provenance 1.5, which it seems like, so I was checking out their Twitter account. It seems like, among other improvements, they will bring proper support for multi-disc games, such as Final Fantasy VII. Like on the PlayStation, when you used, because CDs couldn't contain a lot of data, and you needed to swap the disc inside the PlayStation. And of course, this is a problem for emulators because what are you swapping? So now Provenance 1.5, it seems like it will bring support for multi-disc, and also a new theme for the controller, which sounds and looks kind of fun. It's not a proper tvOS app, but you can download it, you can install it manually, and if you couldn't get Super Nintendo Classic Mini, or if you want to have multiple old consoles, I seriously recommend this one.
Yeah, I've installed it too, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a good way to go back to old games that you might not be able to access on some other system. All right, Federico, I think that's probably enough of Apple TV for probably the next couple of years, unless something drastic changes.
Till 2025, this is all you're gonna get from us.
Right. So I guess we've spent that one. But in any event, I want to thank our sponsors, Newton and Pushover, for making this episode possible. You can find Federico and me writing at macstories.net and on Club Mac Stories. And if you want to find us on Twitter, Federico is at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.